Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee at North Norfolk District Council on Tuesday the 25th of March, 2 p.m. Item 1 on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence.
Apologies as Councillor Penfold, Councillor Bidcoper and Councillor Bickers have sent their apologies.
Thank you. And do we have any substitutes?
None.
And I'll just add in there that our independent person is also unable to attend today, though he has sent in some comments in regard to the papers that I've shared with the chair.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for this meeting? No. Thank you. And items of urgent business. Have we received any?
None received.
Thank you. And now we've moved to item 6, the minutes of the meeting of the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee held on the 3rd of December 2024. First of all, if you just read through or check through the minutes and for accuracy, and let me know if there's anything that you have noticed.
Can I ask a question, please? On page 12, we've got at the top Director of Resources to follow up on missing contract with Assistant Director of Environment. Just wonder whether that had been done.
I don't know, I can follow that up, but in regard to, I don't know whether you want to do accuracy of the minutes.
So we're doing the accuracy of the minutes
And
first because I've got a few questions, and then we'll go to comments if that's okay. Is everyone happy with the accuracy? I'll take that as yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. We're happy. And next was the question of the missing contract.
I think an email may have been sent to all members of RAC in regard to that. So I'll check that. And if that's not the case, I'll arrange for something to be sent.
Thank you.
Yes, I certainly do remember receiving an email to say it was quite shortly after the meeting to say that the contract had been found. So I think we can rest assured it has been. Do you have any other questions? I've got a few, if not. Right, so on page 12, the comment is a written update to be provided for the next meeting on the progress made towards meeting the recommendations set out in the private sector housing audit. And we don't seem to have received the written update. So before the next meeting, we need to work out who, or after this, work out who is responsible for sending the information and getting that ticked off. If that's okay. Thank you. Page 11, the action at the bottom of the table. The action was the internal auditor to provide the committee with a brief progress update each month to ensure the audit action plan remains on track for completion in March 2025. Now, I am aware that we are an awful lot further forward with our action plan. Things have been well cleared in the last 3 months, but we haven't had a progress update each month, and it would be really good from now on to be able to do that, if that's possible.
I think we definitely did it 1 month. I think you're right. I don't think we've been consistently doing it each month. I think we might have done it in January, and then because of the audit committee meeting coming up, I think it's got missed because of the progress report. But in terms of, I think, do you still want it? Because obviously I suppose we are still got audits going on with the plan isn't quite complete. So it would be, you'd want to know that we're going to get there ready for annual opinion, and that wouldn't be, that's fine, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, and moving forward, then we won't be in a position where in future things could slip out to how they have been of late. And if there's not much, it's not going to be a massive task to do either, is it? It'd be great. Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you. Come to page 13, and the comment there was, the chair explained it's helpful for councillors to be able to respond when asked on social media. And I really would like to say at this time a note of thanks from Alison Sayer for the tanker updates, and the member feedback on that was excellent. It made such a difference because people were able to give up-to-date information all the time. And I think she needs to be congratulated for her diligence in doing what she has done to keep everybody informed. On, sorry, to page 15 and action. The performance manager to discuss with the responsible officer a risk relating to the lost contract. And then it goes on to talk about the lack of property assessments and other issues mentioned earlier in the meeting. And obviously we are very happy that the contract was found, but have there been more property assessments done? And if not, why haven't they been done? We couldn't seem to find it in the information.
So we found the contract. Is there a further information that you want to come back to?
No, I think
this.
The lack of property assessments, well, on that report, as I recall, it also mentioned that the property assessments haven't been done for a long time, and in fact the ones we read haven't been done since opening. I think there was concern expressed at the meeting about property assessments being done on a regular basis. Do we have the record with that? So it should probably come to ground. If that's possible.
Thank you.
Any more questions on the minutes, or shall we can move on to the next item, which is the action list. And we've got any questions on the action list? Page 19. I've got a couple of questions. Minute 109, the external audit letter. The Director of Resources will provide an update each month to let the committee know if we are on track to meet the publication dates for the statements of accounts. Will we be getting those?
The Director of Resources wasn't able to come to committee today, but I can arrange for an email to be sent round in regard to progress.
Brilliant, thanks, Cara. Then on the same page, internal audit progress and follow-up report. The internal auditor to provide the committee with brief progress. We've spoken about that. Following up the missing contract, we've spoken about that. I think we've covered those in the earlier questions, so Right, did we follow up on page 20, the performance manager to discuss with the responsible officer a risk relating to the lost contract at the Reef Leisure Centre, the lack of property assessments and the other issues mentioned earlier in the meeting? Well, I think we've covered that really, haven't we, as well? So I'm happy with that. So now let's see. So item 8 is the internal audit plan 2025-26. So I'll open that for questions. Actually, I think that would be really helpful, wouldn't it, before we open and do questions afterwards? Good.
Thank you. So yes, what you have before you is then our internal audit plan for 25-26. So you may remember me talking about a different approach to planning this year to move away from that kind of cyclical audits of service areas, which doesn't really add a lot of value if the area is still doing quite well and we're just doing the same old thing. So I talked to the senior leadership team about a new approach and a new model, which they were happy with. And then that meant all of us coming together to do a 2-3 hour session. And we went through the corporate priorities and the corporate risks, the red and amber ones. And we talked about audits relating to that. And we went through the business areas and talked about risks and priorities and how that all interrelated. And the result of that is the internal audit plan that you see in Appendix 2. So what you'll notice is that audits have been prioritised into essential, high, medium and low. And that's because there were certain audits that we definitely want to be done. So essential audits are things like risk and governance. I have to do an opinion on risk and governance and internal control. So those have been classified as essential. And then we went through the other ones and decided in our session together whether we thought they were essential, high, medium or low. Potentially the low ones will be the ones that we may not get time for, but because they're low, we don't mind if they move into another year, unless something happens and they get reclassified, then, you know, they might need to be done. So we're going to have quarterly reviews because we want to keep the plan nice and flexible and dynamic and being able to respond to changes that happen during the year, whether that be in risk or something else that's going on, a priority change. So there'll be quarterly reviews where we'll go through and just check that we're happy with everything that we're doing. And the other thing I'll just bring out is that you'll see I've put in a high level audit and risk universe, and that's just really to highlight to you that, you know, everything's in the universe, the corporate priorities, the risks and the service areas, but it's just a high level picture for you there. The other document you have is the charter and mandate. Now, I think you've seen the charter before. The mandate part is the new bit that came out of the global internal auditing standards. And the mandate really is that kind of why do we have internal audit? And that comes out of the Audit and Accounts Regulations 2015. I think the charter is very similar to what you've seen before. I think it might be set out a bit clearer under some different headings for you, which I think makes it easier to follow. And there is, as you might have noticed, audit committee oversight. That's quite a good reference point for you and should correlate with your terms of reference. But it does cover the purpose of internal audit, our authority, my role and responsibilities, and the scope of our work. And it is a document that you approve on the basis of your support for internal audit and the head of internal audit in the function that we're doing for you as such. I think that was all I was going to pick out in particular, but obviously happy to take any questions that people have.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this might be a couple of probably very minor things, but it says on page 26, that's right, page 26 in the audit universe and risk. It says the standards require an organisational risk assessment to be completed at least annually as the basis for the plan. This year, reliance has been placed on the council's risk information as detailed in the risk register. When I was reading this, perhaps naively, I mean, it occurred to me, should one simply take the council's risk register as being the kind of summation of the possible risks? I mean, I suppose it's asking you to engage in a kind of double thing, but on the other hand, you know, there might be, you know, aspects of things which actually do constitute a risk, which might not have been realized as such by the, you know, but it might be requiring you to have a degree of omniscience, which is, you know, impossible in the context. I don't know.
And I think you're right. I think there is something in there. I was quite happy as a starting point with the council's risk register. I think it's improved in recent times. I think when we were talking, we did talk about some different risks. Whether that will mean they will end up on the risk register or not, I don't know. But I think as part of the quarterly reviews, particularly on some of the areas we're monitoring, there is that potential for us to widen our discussion around other risks and push stuff through. So I think there's the opportunity there to have that discussion and then think about whether a risk should be added to the risk register, or whether we agree there might be another risk that, yeah, we may be a bit curious about and we want to see where that might go. So I think we've got the forum to do it. And that obviously helps me in the job that I've got to do in terms of, you know, giving some assurance against the council's risks. And I think this is I suppose, our starting point. So I'm sure we will develop over this year and the next year and
Yes.
expand and move forward with the way we're doing this. This is certainly the beginning of our journey on this sort of approach and model.
Yes, it struck me that given things like LGR, then there might be all sorts of kind of risks and terrors that will open up on it. So can I just ask another one? Is that all right? Okay, this might not be answerable again here. This is on page 41 of the agenda, and that's it's the last thing, which says action, which is about energy infrastructure and water resources plans. It says, with partners, develop energy infrastructure and water resources plans for the district by March 2025 and lobby for these key infrastructure constraints in the district to be addressed, blah, blah, blah. I just wondered whether that had actually happened, given that the date there is March 2025. I mean, that's perhaps not for auditors to know necessarily, but. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you. I've got one small typo on page 26. The second box, it says our approach to preparing the council internal audit plan is to develop an audit and risk universe based on understanding should it be of the council's corporate priorities. There.
Yeah.
It's nothing major, just makes a bit more sense to the sentence. And then on page 28, I know you were talking about the low assurance requirements. It's not expected there will be time to address how low assurance requirements as part of this year's internal audit plan. Do you know when the last time they were done? And are we on par with other councils for that?
Yes, I think I'm saying to most, because out of the discussion, lots of things have come out, as you can see, and my budget is the same for last year, and I've got 3 contractors at 3 different rates. So I'm trying to say you're the best contractor for that job. Add that, give some arbitrary days to it, and work out whether I'm within in budget, and that means that the low ones just are probably not going to be able to be fitted in. That might change if my estimated days doesn't turn out to be that, and I've then got some spare days. It might be that one of the lows slips in, and that's how it has worked at all the councils. The same kind of approach I've taken with all of them. Now, whether the lows have been done before, that might be in that column where it says last review and opinion. So if we saw a low, so take the project management framework one on page 34, that's a low. So we're saying possibly that won't get done. And there was an advisory assurance given out in 22-23. So not that long ago, but, not recent, I suppose. So that would be where you could see the last time that a particular a low priority area had been audited.
Thank you. That makes sense of it. Just off the top of your head, do you know what sort of percentage of our work is covered by audit, and how much is low priority? Is that the higher priority is quite most of it covered by audit, or do you?
You've only got we've probably got, I don't think there are many lows actually, maybe 3 or 4. Just skimming down this, I can see, certainly saw 2. Actually, maybe we only got 2 low areas, I think. So that's means that everything else is, high, medium, or essential. So that's not too bad, I don't think.
No, thank you for that. On page 30, it speaks about staffing and may need more staff moving forward. Do we need does that need to be brought forward at all for extra staffing, or do you feel that we are comfortably staffed in what we're doing?
I think because we're getting to that stage where we need to re-procure the main contract. We're entering our 4th year now. It's a 5-year contract, and the main contractor on that contract is not performing fantastically, hence why we've introduced another contractor, and another council who've got spare capacity is also doing some days for us. But I think between the 3 of them, there's enough availability to do everyone's audits. And the idea is always to increase the in-house team if we can. So I've got a senior auditor, and we've been trying to recruit an internal auditor, which is, a little bit struggling to do that. So we're trying to engage some agencies to help with that. I think if we can have that hybrid model of some in-house people in the consortium and a contractor, maybe with the other council helping us, that gives us different rates So enables us to offer better value for money, because some of the audits are fairly straightforward. So if you've got, even a trainee auditor who's well supervised, you can offer a lower daily rate. The audit still gets done and it's still the quality. Whereas some of the audits require someone who's, much more experienced, a bit more critical thinking and ability, therefore we'll have to pay more for that person. So we'll pay a higher rate. But having the various rates means that over all the audits, you can mix and match, swings and roundabouts, but I come back to budget. So I think that's the kind of approach we want, so that we can give that value for money to all the councils in the consortium. My senior auditor is off on maternity leave, which is means I've got to get cover for her, which again I think we might struggle to do. So maybe with the help of the agencies, we'll find someone. But yes, using the contractors, I'm happy that there's enough there that they've got the resources in place, so we should be fine to deliver the plan. There shouldn't really be a problem whether we, manage to recruit or not. We should be fine.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. I think I understand more how it works now. I don't know about other people. Christopher.
Thank you, Teresa. Can you just explain to me what falls off the back of this? Because are you saying you're actually going to take this, the appendices we've got in front of us, and construct a plan for the audit work next year? And how are you going to prioritise that? Because if I look on page 32, for example, the two areas where you've got highlighted as being red and amber, well, carbon net zero given LGR, I would argue, is not particularly a priority at the moment, given some of the other challenges facing the council, particularly around budgets and particularly around housing. Coastal erosion, I would probably agree, is one, given what's happening out at Munsley at the moment. But yeah, I just want to see, don't quite follow what you're going to do with it and what we can expect you to be doing in the months to come, I suppose, in terms of a plan.
So that Appendix 2 is the plan. So on page 34, there's an audit for human resources with an overarching audit scope that we say is essential. So we definitely want to do this audit. So do we show quarters on there? I don't think I've got quarters on there, but that's been assigned to a quarter. I think it might even be Q1. So I will give that out to one of the contractors to do the audit, and the audit will start and the scope will be tightened up and agreed, and we'll agree some days for the work, and they will carry on. So all of these audits in Appendix 2 are the ones we're going to do. The ones right at the bottom, or the ones that say monitor, I realise that Phil, it's actually better if I'd have done this by quarters for everyone else after you. I did the plan by quarters, and it's easy to see the audits for under each quarter, and then see the ones that are grouped together for monitoring. This is a bit, because I've stuck to it by area, it's not quite so easy to see that. But the ones that are that say monitoring are the ones that we had a conversation about and said, we're not too sure, do we want an audit? Let's just talk about it again, review it. And that it could be that they are ones that we suddenly go, no, we do want an audit of customer services, for example, and then you have to get the audits will get reprioritised as such. So anything that says essential, high, medium are going to be done, and the lows, as I said, probably won't be enough time for those. And the monitor ones are the ones that we're continuing to talk about and look at. So I don't know if that makes it any clearer for you. It might have been easier to see in quarters and things, and then in priority order.
Yes, it would be, and I think the priority would help as well, because
Yeah.
then I suppose what was amused me is that you see monitoring, when I thought we're not going to really do anything if you're just monitoring it. There's somebody, as you say, asks you to do something with that. I guess the other, if I may, sort of following on from that being the case, if you look on page 35, the second column along, we've got some in there with no ratings in there at all, so empty boxes. Is that because we haven't done one before, or is it because the box should have been filled, but we've missed it somehow?
Yes, so in the second column where you've got corporate priority or last risk and opinion, yes. So for fixed asset management, we haven't done a specific audit on that. It might have been covered in part over the years under key controls, But a lot of the time with the fixed asset register, the councils don't do any work on it until the end of the year when they do everything in time for the external auditors. So that means probably the external auditors do more work on it than we would ever do on it. So there'll only be a few things that we could do on that if we did an audit. So that might be why it's not had a proper full audit and has been covered in key controls. And that would be the same for budget setting. They haven't had a proper budget setting and control audit. So again, it would have been covered in key controls potentially. But this time we have agreed to do some work, quite specific work that will help them on budget management and control there.
I hadn't actually picked up that we hadn't done that, but it sounds like a sensible one to certainly look at. I guess, of course, that would also sort of flow into external audit, who spend quite a lot of time looking at that particular area. But yeah, okay, that's fine. No, okay, thank you.
Looking at page 34, where we've got outstanding essential audits, there isn't a fully up-to-date the checking with who's presenting the item and ensuring the action plan is fully up to date isn't sort of mentioned on the audit plan, and I was wondering if that might be helpful.
What would you mean by that, Chair, then? Do you mean like where there might be like outstanding actions, you mean?
Yeah, I think so, and when they would be expected to be. I think this was one of the points also raised by our independent person.
Don't know whether the plan is the place for that, but I guess where it might be relevant, so like on the risk management one where it says limited assurance and it's this year, but we are going to do an audit on risk management anyway. But if there were some outstanding actions, I think that might be useful to be detailed so that when we do the review each quarter, if people aren't doing their actions and that's behind, then I might say, right, is it just easy if I go in and do an audit then and see where we are? So I think there's a separate monitoring sheet that we're using for the quarterly reviews. There might be some more information on that to help us with that. And potentially could add more to here, because I thought what I would do, Chair, is when I do my progress report, I'll put the plan as an appendix for you, because as we're saying, there might be changes that I want to point out to you that you will need to approve under the new standards. So significant changes you should be approving. So if I do an appendix with the audit plan in, and I'll do it by quarter and priorities to make it clearer, then I can point out any changes. And if there are any outstanding recommendations, perhaps for the limited reports that are recent, then I can put them in one of the columns, perhaps under the rationale for the audit, so I can show that we've talked about it and whether we've then considered as a team as such with the senior managers and everything, whether we want to do an audit or whether we're going to wait for the actions, and that will give you some connection into that maybe. Would that be useful?
No, I think that sounds like a good way forward. Thank you. Still on page 34, looking at the top, the human resources and corporate priorities substantial and audit priorities essential, and type of work is advisory. And it's obviously something at the moment particularly is really important to us. Should it have a higher priority in the audit?
Well, I guess by saying it's essential, we're saying we're definitely going to do it. And I think that is one of the early ones that we want to do. So I don't know whether I can make it any more of a priority than it is, if that makes sense, unless you need
Yeah,
anything
I
else.
think, no, I think that that answers my question. It's just that the difference between type of work, advisory and assurance. There's advisory that we don't have to. It's not something we have to audit.
I suppose advisory is more about advice on controls. So it's always quite good in a way if you're having, for example, like a new system in place or you're changing your processes, to have an advisory piece of work first to help you get your controls right, and then do the assurance afterwards on the basis that if you followed our advice, you should get a positive assurance, whether that be reasonable or substantial. Whereas if you don't have that advisory work first, and we just go in and do assurance, the chances are, if you haven't set yourself up, you risk getting a negative assurance. So we always say, try and have advisory first if you're making major changes like that. But I think this audit was maybe perceived to be better as advisory rather than assurance, because it is maybe helping the council look at staffing resources in different ways and giving some ideas for how they could improve staff resilience. So it felt more relevant to think about it as advisory rather than assurance.
Thank you. That helps me understand a little more. Page 37. Talking about leisure, and it mentions, you may not be able to answer this one, but it says the FA is requesting a high level of facilities to go with the pitches, which is increasing the cost. Who picks up the tab for this? And if it's not, if it is us, why do we have to? I'm not sure that's an audit question. Another question on page 42. It's just understanding the type of work. Where we've got coastal management, which is obviously one of our highest risks, and the type of work is monitor. What's the difference between monitoring it and auditing it?
So in that case, because there is a coastal audit going on this year, and we don't know the outcome of that audit yet, but also recognising that there was changes going on in the partnership, we said we'd monitor it until the first quarterly review and then see what the audit outcome was. Obviously, if that was a negative assurance, that might raise the risk for auditing, and what does that audit look like? If it turns out to be positive, then it may mean we stick at monitoring it until, I suppose, the changes in the partnership and how, therefore, what structures we put in place. Until that's decided, it may not be relevant for any advisory work, let alone any assurance work. So I expect a bit of an update on that one at the first quarterly review once we know the outcome of the audit and then what the thinking is in terms of audit from that point onwards.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the internal audit charter and mandate. Are there any questions on the next piece? Page 45. I've just got one question. That's okay. So two questions actually. Communications with the audit committee and senior management. It mentions resource requirements and there's nothing to say we need more resource, but we're still behind on some of the audits. Are we reasonably assured that we will be catching up as time goes?
I think we are starting to skip through the audits now as we reach the year end. There's always crossover because it's very difficult to get everything done and go right. 31st of March, that's it. So there will be crossover, but certainly there's no reason why we won't finish into April. Hopefully not much more into May, and therefore I'm in a position to do your annual opinion at the meeting in June as planned. So I don't think there's any problem with that. And we will start this year's audits as well, because as they start to get to that draft stage, the auditors are less involved in the audit and they're ready to move on to the next one, whereas it's the managers who see it through to final at that stage. So there's no reason why we can't get started. So yeah, I don't think we're as behind as we were this time last year. So I think we are, looking at the stats, we are further on in the plan overall in the consortium. But yes, and as we move forward with the three contractors and we're spreading that load, I'd hope we'd be further forward this time next year as well. So I've got no concerns at the moment.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. The next section on there is about the Quality and Assurance Improvement Programme, and it says external assessments are conducted once every 5 years. Do you know when the last one was done?
It was done in October 22. So we're not due until October 27. So that gives us plenty of time, to make sure we're compliant with the new standards. So yeah, it's still a way off as such. Yeah.
Thank you, but reassuring that we're not at that point or behind. So no, thank you. Are there any more questions on item 8? If not, we need to review and approve. We need to approve the internal audit plan and vote on it. Are we happy to? We need a proposer and a seconder. Proposed by Andrew, seconded by Christopher. May we have a vote? All agreed. Thank you. Moving to item 9, the internal audit progress report, March 2025, starting on page 57. Yeah, that would be lovely. Sorry, I'll just take my jacket off. I'm hot.
Right, so there's been no changes to the plan, so you've not had any deferrals or cancellations this year, which is pretty good because other people have had quite a few. So you've done well with that. But we are progressing. We've now got 7 final reports and another one in draft. So you've got 3 finals here. One of them, the cybersecurity, is a confidential paper. So if we want to raise any questions about that, then we'd have to go below the line, so to speak. But they're all positive assurances, so that's good. We've done really well on outstanding recs. I think this time last year we had many more. We've got 13 outstanding, so there's been a tremendous amount of work done on getting the outstanding recs closed and signed off, which is good. The 2 audits that are shown in here is APM issued, not started. They have started. So everything now has started. And the IT ones, I think, are the main ones that got a bit behind. They are progressing. So yeah, we're moving forward now, which is good. happy to take any questions.
Anyway,
I think it probably was finalised before we knew for sure about LGR, but yes, I guess if the council decides it won't pursue that, then they just got to think about a better way of recording the cases in one place. So I guess you're probably right, they won't want to procure anything at this
Yeah.
point. So we'll be looking for them to show us that they can record everything in a better state, I suppose, in a better format than they were.
if it's some radio science, so sorry, can I ask a question on the outstanding recommendations, if I may? On page 73, it's got on the waste management, it says the council has been unable to persuade the borough of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk to agree. Do we know what the issue is there, or is that confidential?
I don't, as I said there, I said I'd try and intervene because obviously we cover all of them. And I did email the relevant person, but I think there was confusion in his reply. So I've gone back to the manager who raised a recommendation at the contractor and said, look, can you just give a bit more insight into what you were actually looking for to see whether we can move this one forward? Because I think there is bits in the contract that cover the disagreements. So I'm not too sure what they were wanting more than that. I think if I can't get more clarity, then I shall write to both of them and say, look, are you happy with the contract as it is or not? And if they come back and say yes, I'll say we just need to close this one down. If they say no, I'll say, well, you have got to speak to the Kings Lynn and sort it out then, because otherwise this is never going to get closed. So I'm waiting for a bit of clarity from the audit manager at the contractor just to explain exactly what it was he was really looking for out of the recommendation in order to go back to both of the councils who are involved and say, happy or not happy then. And then based on that, I'll either be right, let's shut it down, or otherwise I say, right, let's explain that to Kings Lynn and see if we can't move it forward. So yes, because it's been hanging around a while, that one.
Chair, I might be able to add a little bit of clarity for you. So you'll be aware that North Norfolk jointly procured a contract with Breckland Council and the Borough Council of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk. As part of the procurement process, there was an inter-authority agreement that effectively said, protected each of the parties from one of those dropping out or doing something that negated or damaged the procurement activity. And that was in place for the procurement, just to say, security position. After the contract came into force, we continued using the old inter-authority agreement that referred to procurement as the basis, and the contract document as the basis of we're all going to, act in a responsible way that won't damage the position of the contract. I think it's fair to say there have been some occasions with Serco where they have that they clearly have felt on occasions that the contract hasn't always applied in the way that has suited them, as you would expect for a contractor and client relationship. And I think the approach that's been taken by the three authorities has on occasion differed slightly to that challenge from Serco. I think at the time that this audit was done was during one of those periods where the approach was different. And so the audit manager felt that, in effect, redrafting that inter-authority agreement that covered procurement in such a way that it referred to the ongoing running of the contract was an appropriate way to try and mitigate some of the risks associated with that. And so that was the genesis of that recommendation. We have, over a long period of time, there have been occasions where it's not been appropriate to try and move it forward because of the discussions with Serco as a contract position. But for Kings Lynn have felt that there is no need to progress a new inter-authority agreement. One was drafted and agreed between Breckland and North Norfolk. Kings Lynn, I haven't had the reasons. I've approached the assistant director there asking for a response, even as to whether they want to move forward or just tell me that they don't want to move forward, partly so I can write this audit recommendation off, because you'll probably note it's in my name. And I haven't had a response to that. So I did write fairly recently to him asking for the latest position. I will have one last go. I know Teresa has tried as well. I'll have one last go to say, please, can you update me? But at the moment, they have the information I have verbally for them is they've got no intention of renewing the inter-authority agreement because they see it as unnecessary.
That sheds a lot of light on that. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for that. While we're on the same page, may we talk about the other two outstanding recommendations, the key controls and assurance with the penalty charge notices?
So I think we've had a new revised due date for these. So I might suggest, Chair, on that basis, that if these are still outstanding and they pass that date, that we ask people to come in and give you an update in person about how they're going to achieve that. Obviously, if they're done by the 30th of June, then they'll disappear nicely. But I think if we've agreed a new date now, then we now expect them to be done. And if they're not, then we should ask them to come in and just give you a full update as to how they're going to achieve it, and why they need a new revised date, really.
Yes, so it's looking more hopeful as it's now a realistic date, isn't it? Whereas before we had an awful lot of recommendations on the list that were 2 years past their progress date. So I think that's a very good point you've made. So any other questions?
Thank you. One or two more, if I may, on the outstanding. If we go down to the environmental health, it says the council and to ensure that all licence fee income has been correctly accounted for. Do we know whether it's a sizable sum of money, or are we talking loose change there? Just trying to quantify how big an issue that is.
Without going back to the report, I don't know. I'd have to see if well, hopefully it is covered in the report, and I'm not online to access. I might have to let you know that.
I think similarly, we've got land charges, the one on the following page. Again, sort of how big an issue actually is in financial terms. Reconciliations. Let's have a look. It's not urgent, but have a look at it. Yeah, big fine.
Well, the recommendation is that the committee is requested to receive and note progress with delivering the 24-25 internal audit plan and the outstanding recommendations. So I think we're happy to receive and note that. And I would like to say that I think huge progress has been made on outstanding recommendations. And I think it needs to be fed back that, you know, people have taken it seriously and have really got to grips with it. And there's always the odd one, isn't there, which is a challenge, which is often outside other people's control that, you know.
Chair, can I just comment on that? Because obviously the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board has been having a focus on this in addition to obviously the work that internal auditors have been doing. And I think we now have got significantly down to those that just need resolving. I think there's a number that probably are in the to be closed situation. The next focus is obviously, as they are for the board, is as they coming on to the board, to start looking at them prior to them reaching a point at which they're overdue, effectively. So to put some intervention work in earlier as that. So we are beginning to look at recommendations or audit recommendations as they're coming through, and starting to ask responsible managers, what are your plans to achieve this by the date? And if the date is unachievable, to flag that very early on in the process, so that they're saying, we don't think we're going to be able to make this and this is why. So we should be in a position where there is more oversight of some of that activity, in the hopes that we can make sure that as you're coming through, you are getting reports that say they are the real exceptions, that this hasn't been achieved for a very specific reason that's well known and flagged very early on in the process.
Thank you. I think that's really encouraging, and I think it's a really positive step forward from where the board's standing, and it's all credit to everybody who's worked really hard to change and turn around the outstanding recommendations and put realistic dates on the other ones. So I think we're looking far more where we should be. I think that's, from our point of view, I think that's brilliant. Thank you. So now we move on to item 10, which is the review of the council's asset register. I invite questions.
Sorry, this is again a very small one. On page 85, you've got number 35, which talks about the London Bridge Public Convenience. And this seems to be repeated on at number 151 on page 87. I'm not sure whether that has any significance. Are they different things? Well, that's in a different category. That starts, does it not, on a, well, you get buildings and then you get land. It just seems to be a part of the same non-current assets list. I don't know whether it's a misprint or whether it actually has any significance. If not, it's been counted twice.
Thank you for that. Yes, I equally, I found one on page 93, which is lines 432 and 433, which appear to be for the Land and Wall, Doctor Steps Path, Putting Green, North Lodge Park, which appear to be the same numbers. So they probably would be worth looking at. And I had been asked a question on an explanation as to how the book values are calculated. And I wondered if we might be able to get some sort of explanation as to the figures, because when we look at them, I don't quite follow the values of them. And I just think it might be helpful for us to understand a bit better.
All I understand is the values relate to the land and the buildings as they're valued separately as different components of the asset.
Yeah. Fair enough. They do seem, yeah, figures hard to comprehend, but if they've been done by the correct way, then we can't really do more than that, can we?
Yeah.
So thank you. Is there any other? Yes.
Again, a sort of a more technical query. Actually, Officer Hems might be able to answer this one. And we have on the fourth one on the list is the Fakenham Connect SPA. I'm not sure what SPA stands for, Oak Street. I thought the County Council owned the Fakenham Connect building and we just rented rooms in there. So I'm a bit surprised to see that on here.
Councillor Cushing, I'm grateful for your faith in me that I will know the answer. Unfortunately, I'm going to let you down on this occasion because I don't actually know what it is. I think I certainly know we can find out and come back to you as to what it is. That's okay.
Well, life is full of disappointments, but no, I've always understood it wasn't. It was. I probably got that from the chief executive that we didn't own that. We just rented it. But I mean, it's actually, to be fair, it's not a vital question. So,
I suppose, Councillor, it could be that the length of the lease on that land means that effectively it is a. But I will find out and come back to the committee and inform you.
If I just had a broader question, is does anyone know how this list compares to other councils? Because it seems an awful lot on this list. I'm thinking ahead of LGR, somebody's going to have to go through all of these to work out where they're going to sit going forward, whether they stay with the new unitary authorities or whether you want to offload them elsewhere, or how you go about offloading them. And that's going to be a task. Even to do this one on its own is going to be a task in itself, I would have thought. But
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other questions on item 10? In which case it's recommended that the committee note the contents of the report and receive it. No, sorry, I've lost the page there. That is correct. To note the contents of the report and the exempt appendix A. Are we happy to receive those? Thank you. And now we'll move on to item 11, which is the corporate risk register. And we need to receive and comment on the interim corporate risk register as at February 2025. Crispin, comments?
If I may, I have one question. Page 108, I see this is on the medium-term financial plan. It's got the risk score having reduced, which I don't really fathom given that the financial outlook is grim indeed. So I don't understand the thinking why that's gone down, personally.
Sorry, Councillor Cushing, could you just repeat that for me?
The risk register on page 108, it has the medium-term financial plan. Looking at the description of the risk, reduce funding to fund current levels of service and produce a balanced budget. Use of reserves is not a sustainable strategy to bridge income and expenditure. However, if you look at the score of the risk, it is actually reduced to 12. Now, given that the last time when we did the annual budget last month, the future budget predicted shortfalls for the 2 years to come are sizable indeed. They certainly haven't gone down. I don't really understand why the risk rating has gone down.
I can't comment specifically on that one because it would be a risk that has been done by the risk owner effectively, or the person responsible for that risk, which would be Tina Stankley, and therefore she's not present. So, but we can update as to the thinking behind that. I would imagine that it's relating to the slightly better, greater certainty we had in terms of the budget setting and setting a balanced budget and having smaller deficit with the plans around the slightly reduced level of new tasks within the annual action plan that demand some of that money. But I'll get you an update.
On page 102, looking at the action there, it's talking about the resources and the property services team and their resources. At this point in time, I think we do need to be really protecting our assets. So the fact that we look to be shorter staff there, is that still a reasonable risk, bearing in mind the other external features on what's the word on that pressures?
So this is risk CR001, the deteriorating and underused assets, property assets. Okay, so the risk itself is around the properties deteriorating, becoming underused, and I think in terms of that, the risk provision hasn't changed. So there are some, as you say, there is some recruitment process going on at the moment in terms of a couple of posts that would support in terms of the surveyor activity associated with that. But we don't have a shortage in terms of those who would maintain those assets, etc. Partly because of we have obviously our own internal multi-skill building operatives, but also we have the measured term contract, which allows us to draw down resource or draw down people to be able to do building activity on our assets on our behalf.
Thank you. That answers that. That's encouraging. Looking at CR 008 loss of information, it's talking about the IT security policy was recently updated and all staff were required to sign that they'd read and understood it. Do councillors have to undergo the same process? Because if so, it should be written in. Should it be written in under CR 008? If not, why are they a different case? Sorry to ask.
I can't remember off the top of my head whether the IT security policy relates to councillors as well. Usually the policies are aimed at employees, but there is considering what the purpose of it is, I think it is a good idea if I take that back to the IT team and check that that's being done.
Thank you. That'd be really good. That's a comment in there. One more question on CR 034. Do we know with net zero and LGR, do we know the current situation on net zero, particularly with current projects? Are there, I think we are having to put some on hold, aren't we, because of the future? but presumably the ones on the register will still be going ahead in fashion.
I think it's best if I get a response from the climate change net zero or decarbonisation board, sorry, which is one of the sister boards to the one I chair, to give you the update. I know that the considerations around net zero in terms of the activity that we're undertaking and committee reports that are going forward are increasingly becoming cognizant of the net zero impact or the impact on our carbon footprint. I think the issue around that net zero is going to be where some of that investment may or may not go in terms of the priority given the position around LGR. I don't think there's any change of position around our commitment to decarbonisation and to endeavouring to reduce our carbon footprint as much as possible. So I think you're correct. The landscape may be a little bit different at the moment. I think with many of these things, it's a question of referring back to the original risk, which is the bit listed at 1 within each of these. I don't necessarily think that they need to be considered as to whether they're still the risk is still the same or whether we've got a different risk now and we need to shut one down and re-articulate it in a slightly different fashion. So yes, that is something certainly as corporate leadership team, when we're reviewing these risks on a regular basis, we look at and consider in terms of whether the risk is still the risk as described originally. And we have shut some down recently and looked at we're looking at shutting some down and creating a new risk that more accurately describes the position that we're at the moment. But I can get you an update from the chair of the decarbonisation board if that's acceptable to you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I think that would be useful. I think we are in such a mobile position at the moment. It's just it makes it all the more important that we are continually reviewing our risks, doesn't it really? So no, that would be great. Did we cover why? There's one more about the food waste, why it's not being added straight away, I think. Oh, and there's another one there. Yeah, but the food, yes. Why is there a delay on adding food waste onto the risk register? Is it something that's coming online? That was.
I think it was inadvertently missed off, so it will be in the next version.
Thank you.
Chair, if it's any reassurance, I think within the food waste project there is a risk register being developed as part of our standard approach in terms of our project management framework. So it's within the project management framework that just needs to be transferred across and identify what the actual organisational risk is associated with that.
That's good news. We just needed to say it will be on the next one, so that's fine. And we obviously are aware it's very much in the pipeline, isn't it, coming along? So thank you. I think we've covered most of the other points that I wanted to bring up. I think we can receive corporate risk register as at February 25. We're happy to receive that. Thank you. Next is item 12, which is the procurement exemptions register.
So I'm required to provide a list of exemptions granted at each GRAC committee. I do a rolling list, and in front of you are the exemptions granted from the 18th of November 2024 to the 12th of March 2025. In the previous period, 2 exemptions were reported to the committee, and this time 3 exemptions, if you've got any questions.
Thank you. No, happy with that. All makes sense. So now we move on to item 13, which is the forward work programme. And has anyone got any comments on the forward work programme? Stu?
I think we were suggesting that the GERAC self-assessment for June slips till next March on the basis that we want to make sure that the actions from the last self-assessment are all done before we move on to the second part. So in the SIP for guidance, there was the first self-assessment that we did that resulted in the action plan. And then the next one is a bit more in depth of us looking at how the committee adds value. So we normally do them in March anyway, so that would make sense to move that one to March 26.
Okay, the committee happy with that? Then we will do that. Right. We have no need to exclude the press and public, and I believe there's no other business, no other private business. So I declare the meeting closed.